Is it just me? Seriously, am I the only one that has felt this during the offseason? Am I the only one that feels like 2020 has felt just drastically different in a positive way for the Cleveland Browns than 2019? Is that possible? Now, again, 2019 was full of optimism and hope, but it was a different kind of optimism and hope. It was kind of a entitled optimism and hope. We have these players, so we must be this good. That was the energy going around in 2019. It was a more entitled energy. It was a more, we ought to be this good, look at our roster, but it wasn't an energy that we felt collectively. And you know what? The second things went wrong in Tennessee, that got exposed because the entire feeling about the team and what we felt like we were entitled to last season, myself included, completely flipped after that Tennessee game. And that brings me to the 2020 offseason because, sure, you could say the same thing. We got Austin Hooper now, we got Jedrick Wills, we fixed our offensive line. We better be this good, but that's not the energy. The energy isn't we better be this good. It's just that we feel very confident quietly. Well, not so quietly because I'm making this video, but we feel pretty confident that the Browns are going to be pretty good this year. And why is that? And a lot of these things and feelings that I've described can be intangible, but everything can kind of be broken down and understood on a tangible level. So let's talk about it. Now, as I have evaluated my own feelings on why I feel like 2020 is just going to be such a better year, obviously, than 2019 was, I've had to break this down in my mind about why it is that I feel this way. What things actually happen tangibly that combined together to make me feel so much better about this offseason in a way that I did not feel about 2019. And again, 2019, I thought the team ought to be good because they had a good roster. But again, we didn't really evaluate the feeling behind the team. This year, the feeling is different. And one of the main reasons why I think this is a more earned and deserved feeling of confidence for Browns fans this offseason is because of the structure. Now, when I say the structure, I am talking about many different levels and different types of structure that just has improved for the Cleveland Browns this offseason. First, you could talk about organizational structure. This team went from a organization ran by DePodesta, but also John Dorsey, who hired Freddie Kitchens, who DePodesta didn't want, and those two were kind of going at it with each other, and there was always that friction in this. Did DePodesta agree with all the moves that Dorsey was making? Did Dorsey agree with some of the suggestions that DePodesta was making? And there was always that friction in the structure that did not make it organizationally sound. Now that's different. DePodesta is the guy clearly at the top of the structure. He hired the GM that he wants in Andrew Berry, and he also hired the head coach that he wants in Kevin Stefanski. So it seems very obvious and clear to me that both Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry are going to be reporting to the exact same guy in Paul DePodesta, who will then report to Jimmy Haslam, which is many levels as you can get from head coach to Jimmy Haslam, the better. Because when those two things mix, i.e. Hugh Jackson, you get terrible results and end up almost trading for A.J. McCarron. So that's very good. And then we talk about coaching structure. I like some of the structure going on in the coaching staff. I'm questionable of the lack of experience as far as head coaching experience goes. But I do think there's a nice structure. You have on the defensive side of the ball where Kevin Stefanski isn't going to spend a lot of his time an experienced former defensive coordinator in Joe Woods. And then on the other side of the ball, you have somebody like Alex Van Pelt, who's very well thought of, highly recommended coach that doesn't have a ton of offensive coordinator experience. He was an offensive coordinator before, so that helps, but also not so much of an established name at that position that it doesn't allow Kevin Stefanski to have a little bit of influence in there. So there's not going to be that same friction that a guy like Todd Monken would have with Freddie Kitchens, who rightfully so, Todd Monken would probably would probably have an issue with a guy who's only been a offensive coordinator for like 8 weeks having say on his offense when he's been, a long-term offensive coordinator. There's no natural friction in the coaching situation like there was last year. Again, Todd Monken, Freddie Kitchens, that was always going to have friction. I don't know why that pairing was made, but that was always going to have friction. Then you have what I honestly think is the most important part, and the part I harped on at the end of the season last year, is a better roster structure. I don't think the Browns roster last year was bad. I just think they missed the glue that went in between the big parts, the offensive line, the veteran defensive depth pieces on the line. These are all the small things that the Browns didn't have last year. And also, when you look at this from a friction standpoint, there's not a ton of major roster question marks. There are some things that I would love them to fix, like the defensive line, but as far as major roster question marks where you're like, you have no idea who's going to start on opening day, it's not really there on this team. And then when you look at this and compare it to last year, right? Last year, I think 3 of the offensive tackle positions were up for grab: left tackle, right tackle, and right guard. You also had David Njoku in a competition for the starting tight end spot with Demetrius Harris. So again, on something very key like the offensive line, and honestly a lot of the pass protecting situation, you had a ton of question marks. You had no idea what you were going to do in that situation with no fix in sight. This year, there's not a lot of questions about the offensive line. I think a lot of people have assumed Chris Hubbard's going to take that right guard spot because he's going to flip there, or you can have Wyatt Teller put in there. But when you have 4 of the positions set, and you just need to fill 1, that's a much more attainable task than when you have 3 offensive line positions up for grab. When you compare the structure from 2019 to the structure from 2020, 2020 has a lot less gaps in it, a lot less things that you have to take a logic gap to get to why that won't be a problem. And that is a very good thing. But there's also something else that's combining in this kind of balloon of good feelings about the 2020 Browns, and that is... Now, I picked this word specifically because I don't think and agree with the take that, the Browns are being quiet and that's why they're going to be better. No, I don't think they're really being quiet. There's a ton of workout videos. They're really showing off what they're doing. Odell has a whole vlog on his YouTube channel, and I have no problem with any of that. I don't think the problem last year was the noise. I think the problem was that the noise was very unfocused. Noise is one thing, right? I'm not going to complain because somebody's making noise, but when that noise is not focused on really what you're trying to better yourself at in that offseason, then we have problems. I mean, when Baker's having these Twitter beefs with Colin Cowherd, in hindsight, probably wasn't the best thing for him. And not because it took time away from his workout, it's just it added more things that would be used against him if he had the slightest hiccup in 2019. I think that's what he learned. Not that tweeting took time away from his workout, but that the tweeting, it just added more and more snow to an avalanche that if he made one mistake, boom, would fall right on top of him. And he learned last year that I don't think he did well recovering from that avalanche smacking him. It truly did affect him. And also last year, and this really isn't any of the players' fault, just was a lot of chaos. The Browns were really rapidly trying to make a jump. They hired a new head coach. They traded for Odell Beckham. They made a bunch of splashes in free agency. It was a very chaotic offseason last year. You had the Duke Johnson trade and everything else going on in OTAs. It was very chaotic. A ton of news stories about the Browns. And in this year, there's not that much chaos. One, because there's not as many eyeballs on the team because they disappointed last year. And also just because of the whole situation going on right now. It's just also a less chaotic football environment, which I think is ultimately a good thing. I think the chaos got the better of the Browns, specifically Freddie Kitchens, because it just didn't seem like he was ready to handle having that much attention. And I don't really blame him. He was a first-year head coach. First-year head coaches are usually not asked to handle this kind of chaos. But for Kevin Stefanski, one, his demeanor seems like he's more apt for that kind of chaos. And two, he just doesn't have to deal with the same level of chaos that Freddie Kitchens did last year. Freddie Kitchens took that bullet. All that stuff that happened last year. This year, they signed Austin Hooper, which is big time, but it's not like trading for Odell Beckham and signing and Olivier Vernon and making like all these trades and doing all these things that they did last year. So there's less chaos surrounding the team. And also it feels like the team and its star players and its key players are a lot more focused this offseason than they were last year. Now, timing, right? This might not make any sense because nothing's been on time in 2020 and everything's been chaotic, but there's levels. A delayed training camp, which looks more and more like it's going to be a reality for the NFL, as they haven't really figured out a plan on what they're going to do if they can't open up in the circumstances that they're used to. Even if that's the case, I honestly think that the timing is kind of in the Browns' favor in that way. Remember that Jarvis and Odell had surgery immediately after the season ended, and they wouldn't be scheduled to come back until the start of camp. Now, when somebody comes back off of surgery, both of them lower extremity surgeries. Odell was sports core surgery, and then Jarvis was a hip surgery. So you knew even if they came back early to make camp as scheduled, they probably would not practice that much at the beginning or at the end of camp in order to preserve their health for the season. That's just how things were going to time out to be for the Browns. That would mean for a second offseason in a row, you would get maybe a week or two of camp snaps with the core Odell, Jarvis, Baker Mayfield, Kareem Hunt, and Nick Chubb all together practicing on a rep. But all of a sudden, you delay training camp just a couple of weeks, maybe even a month, then you end up in a situation where Odell and Jarvis should have no limitations once that starts. They should be able to practice fully. Even if camp is shortened a week or two, it's going to be more time that you're going to be able to have together with your core offensive unit. And that's what matters than if the regular timetable happened. And that's really what matters when it comes to getting these guys healthy for the offseason. So the timing kind of works out on that front. And then you look at the league rules. The NFL added an extra playoff spot. And if you don't think that matters for the Cleveland Browns, it absolutely does, because the Browns are in a division, the AFC North, that has routinely sent 3 playoff teams with 1 less seed than there was this year. So you know that that's going to come into a factor, especially when you look at the division. Baltimore has no reason to seem like they're going to regress anytime soon. Cincinnati looks like they're going to get better. And, you know, I'm not high on the Pittsburgh Steelers this offseason, but a lot of people are. So maybe they're still Pittsburgh. I don't know. Even if what I think of the Steelers comes true, they would be one of the better last place teams in the NFL. So you have a situation that's timing out that's going to make it easier to get the reps that you need with your star players all together that wouldn't be available if they all came back scattered on their from their rehab schedules. Yes, your division is tough, but I don't think it's unreasonable to expect that you can finish in the top 2 of the division, at least in second place. And you're also in a situation where there's an extra playoff spot, so there's more room for error. Another factor I think is going to be important is that it seems probable that there will be either limited crowds or no crowds at the start of the regular season. And if that's the case, I actually think that's a benefit for the Cleveland Browns. For a young team that struggled to live up to expectations, that struggled to live up to the pressure put on them by a lot of people in this city and in the national media, having no fans around to remind you of all of that pressure and just being allowed to play ball might simplify things and might help a young football team get comfortable with this ideal that they're supposed to be good. If you start the season off in Baltimore, the pressure is drastically lower than it would have been before, because that's not truly a road game. It's more like a practice environment, you know. So these are good things for young teams, because what separates a veteran team from a young team? Experience in those big moments, knowing how to handle those crazy crowds and when they get too loud. But if those things are eliminated, then the gap between an experienced team like Baltimore and a lesser experienced team like Cleveland starts to close just a little bit, and makes things just a little bit easier for a young team to get right on track. And I think a combination of all of these things that I have discussed in this video are why I personally feel so much better about the 2020 Browns and so much more confident in the 2020 Browns in a more deserved and earned way than I did about 2019. I'm not going to go crazy like I did last year and go with 13-3. I don't even know what I predicted, but it was a ridiculous number given what they got. But I feel very confident saying that this team is likely to be at least 10-6, maybe 9-7 if some things go wrong with some injuries, but 10-6, 11-5, that range, I feel really confident in predicting that for the Cleveland Browns. But let me know your thoughts down below. Have you felt this feeling that I'm feeling right now, or do you feel much differently? Are you anxious about this team? Are you nervous about this team? Let me know down in the comment section below. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Don't forget the like button, hit that subscribe button, and ding that notification bell so you can be notified when I upload. But again, guys, thank you for watching. Have a great day. Have a good night.